A drunk fighter decided to mess with a royal guard, but when he jumped, he missed and accidentally hit him right in the face. The crowd gasped, and what happened next? No one expected. London was going about its usual business. Crowds of tourists flocked to Buckingham Palace, eager to capture a glimpse of royal grandeur. The square in front of the massive gates was packed. Camera flashes flickered in the air, the hum of endless conversations mixed with children's laughter and the clicking of phone shutters. People tried to catch the moment when the royal guards would show the slightest emotion, but they stood still, like statues carved from stone. Red uniforms, massive bearskin hats, impeccable posture. They were the living symbols of Britain's discipline and resilience. But today, that order was doomed to be broken. When he stepped onto the square, the atmosphere shifted. Tall, massive, with a heavy fighter-like gait, he moved as if he owned the place. His face was a living testament to hundreds of fights. A long, poorly healed scar stretched across his left cheek, distorting his features. His ears were swollen, like torn-up lumps of flesh, a reminder of too many rounds in the ring. His nose. It had probably once been straight, but now it was bent, poorly set after yet another break. He was dressed like a man who didn't care what others thought. A black leather jacket with scratched-up sleeves, a t-shirt with a Fight Club logo, worn-out jeans, and heavy boots that practically begged for a brawl. His hands, veiny, sinewy, covered in thin white scars, looked like they had never known a day without pain. But the most important thing wasn't how he looked. He was drunk, wasted. The stench of alcohol surrounded him like an invisible cloud. His walk was slightly unsteady, but his movements still held a dangerous edge. His gaze, hazy but gleaming with aggression. He was the kind of man who looked for trouble. Not because he needed it, but because it was in his nature. And then his eyes locked onto a target. A royal guard. Tall, unshaken, the embodiment of British discipline. His red uniform sat on him perfectly. His polished boots gleamed under the streetlights, and his massive bearskin hat added to his commanding presence. He stood straight, his eyes fixed in the distance, as if the air before him was more important than everything else. He didn't move. He didn't react. He was immune to the chaos of the world. That irritated the drunk tourist. "Let's see about that," he muttered under his breath, smirking. He turned, staggering slightly, heading toward the nearest trash bin. People nearby instinctively stepped aside, even though they didn't yet understand what this man was planning. He was looking for something that would make his evening interesting. And he found it. An empty paper coffee cup. The game had begun. The crowd slowly but surely began to realize something was about to happen. A tense silence hung in the air. Some people had already pulled out their phones, sensing that they were about to witness a moment they'd want to rewatch 100 times. Others exchanged uneasy glances, unable to believe what they were seeing. One man in glasses muttered to his wife, "That guy looks like he's about to do something really stupid." And he was right. The drunk tourist swayed but quickly straightened up, pretending he had everything under control. In reality, staying balanced was a struggle, but his pride and the alcohol in his system kept him from recognizing the truth. He was enjoying the attention, feeling like the center of the universe. People were watching him, following his every move, waiting for his next action, and he loved being in the spotlight. With drunken confidence, he stepped up close to the guard, ignoring the murmurs spreading through the crowd. For a moment, he froze, staring at the motionless soldier. It was as if he was trying to figure out what this man was feeling. How could he stand so straight? How could he be so emotionless when he, the great and mighty him, was standing right in front of him, about to put on a show for the entire crowd? He didn't care about traditions. With a wide grin and the careless agility of a drunk man, he pulled a crumpled paper cup out of his pocket and rolled it between his fingers. He wobbled slightly, but managed to stay on his feet. Then, slowly, with theatrical precision, he placed the cup right on top of the guard's bearskin hat. The crowd gasped. The air grew heavier. People held their breath. This wasn't just some dumb tourist prank. This was a direct challenge. Is he insane? Guards don't move, but for this, something's definitely about to go down. But the tourist was soaking up every second of it. He took a few steps back, proudly admiring his work. Then, turning toward the crowd, he spread his arms wide, like a magician presenting his grand trick. Ladies and gentlemen, attention! I present to you a true masterpiece. The crowd fell silent. Some people shook their heads, while others watched with keen interest. Someone was already dialing the police, sensing impending disaster. Others tried to talk him down. Hey man, maybe don't. This is the Royal Guard. But the drunk tourist was beyond stopping. He felt invincible. A grand idea formed in his head. He looked at the cup again. His eyes sparkled with childlike mischief, but combined with his intimidating appearance and drunken clumsiness, it looked more like the beginning of something dangerous. He took another step back, tensed his muscles, took a deep breath, and got into a fighting stance. All right, folks, watch and learn. The crowd didn't know whether to laugh or run. Some people chuckled nervously, while others stiffened. Tourists with phones at the ready prepared to capture the moment. The guard didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't show a hint of irritation. He stood as still as ever. And then, the tourist jumped. His leg shot up, aiming for the cup. It was supposed to be the perfect kick. One of those slow-motion highlight reel moments that go viral on TikTok and rack up millions of views. He could already picture the comments. Whoa, what accuracy. This guy's a machine. Nobody could have done it better. He could already see his success, but alcohol had other plans. He missed. His foot sailed right past the cup, but it didn't miss the guard's face. His boot struck the soldier's cheekbone. For a split second, time froze. The crowd let out a collective gasp of horror, and then everything exploded. The crowd gasped, and an eerie silence fell over the square. It felt as if even the wind had stopped, as if all of London had frozen, watching the moment unfold. For what felt like an eternity, time stood still. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. One of the Queen's guards, always as motionless as a statue, had moved. But the most terrifying part wasn't that he moved. It was how he moved. Lightning fast, precise, without hesitation. This wasn't just a step forward. This was a strike, calculated to the last inch, delivered with an unshakable force that sent chills down the spines of those watching. The butt of his rifle struck the tourist's solar plexus like a hammer, a brutal force that ripped the air from his lungs with a sharp, strangled gasp. The same man who had stood so arrogantly just seconds ago collapsed like a broken puppet, his body folding in on itself. He convulsed as if hit with an electric current before crashing to his knees, desperately trying to breathe, but his lungs no longer obeyed him. The crowd exploded. Oh my God! Did you see that? The guard just hit him! That idiot had it coming! A whirlwind of reactions erupted. Some people let out nervous laughter, others screamed in shock, while dozens fumbled for their phones, eager to capture the moment. But it wasn't over. The guard moved again. He stepped forward, towering over the fallen tourist like an immovable force of nature, standing above him with a cold, silent authority. There was no anger in his movements, no emotion, only flawless, mechanical precision. This was not an outburst. This was not an accident. This was an answer. The sound of his boots hitting the stone pavement rang through the square like rolling thunder before a storm. His slow, deliberate steps made the very air feel heavier. Beneath the shadow of his towering bearskin hat, his eyes were unreadable, his posture unshaken. He was discipline incarnate. And then, he stopped. He turned his head slightly, as if confirming his actions, as if wordlessly declaring, "Yes, I did that." A breath, a pause, and then the voice. "Step back, now." He didn't shout, but the force of his words split through the silence like a thunderclap. It was an order, cold, absolute, unquestionable. And in that moment, the tourist understood that he had made a mistake that could never be undone. He tried to breathe, but his ribs ached from the impact. Air scraped into his lungs like broken glass. He raised his hands weakly, but his fingers trembled uncontrollably. His body had betrayed him, his head spun, his mind teetering between panic and disbelief. He wanted to say something, to beg, to protest. I... But there were no words left, and then, breaking through the crowd, 2 police officers approached, their faces unreadable, their pace steady, unhurried. There was no rush, no hesitation, because they already knew. It was over. The crowd in the square erupted. Some people laughed, some clapped, and others, forgetting they were mere tourists, shouted, "Serves him right!" Smartphones captured every second of his humiliation, spreading the footage worldwide in real time. But the man who, just a minute ago, thought he owned the moment, suddenly realized that everything had gone terribly wrong. He was no longer the fearsome fighter used to intimidating opponents. Now he was just another man who had been struck down and was now being roughly grabbed by 2 police officers. "You are under arrest for assaulting a member of the Royal Guard." The words were clear, sharp, like a sentence. And that's exactly what it was. The Royal Guards rarely moved, but when they did, it meant someone had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The drunk tourist gasped, his mouth opening, but instead of forming words, only a weak, incoherent wheeze came out. His entire body ached. His solar plexus burned from the rifle butt strike, his lungs refused to fill with air, and his head pounded from the mix of alcohol and the crushing realization he was screwed. "Come on, guys. It was just a joke." His voice was pitiful, but no one laughed. No one defended him. Even the random tourists who, just 5 minutes ago, had been filming his antics and probably hitting like on his stunts, were now looking at him with disgust. One of the officers gripped his right wrist tightly, while the other twisted his left arm behind his back. It hurt. It was humiliating. "Hands behind your back." He tried to resist, but the officers weren't interested in wrestling with him. They had already won. The crowd erupted again. "No way! This idiot really thought he could get away with it? Serves him right. You don't mess with the guards. Hold the camera steady. I want to see his face when they throw him in the police car." It felt like the whole world was watching him. The power he was so used to feeling had vanished. Usually, he was the one who decided when to leave the ring, when to end a fight. But now, nothing was in his control. The metallic click of the handcuffs was like thunder in a clear sky. The cold steel clamped around his wrists, sealing his fate. This was the end. "You can't do this to me," he croaked, trying to lift his head. The officers didn't respond. They didn't even look at him like he was someone worth acknowledging. To them, he was just another fool who thought he could disrespect the symbols of Britain. With each step they took, dragging him through the crowd, only one word pounded in his mind: mistake. The crowd kept filming. People threw sarcastic remarks. Someone whistled a mocking tune, and others just laughed. He had always been the one laughing last. But not today. Today, he was the joke. For a brief moment, through the pain and drunken haze, he turned back, trying to catch one last glimpse of the man he had tried to humiliate. The guardsman stood at his post, as if nothing had happened, as if this was just another day at work, as if the drunk fighter had never even existed. But now, that guardsman was the most important person in his life, the man who had crushed his pride in an instant. The morning didn't start with the usual hangover and a pounding headache. It started with a nightmare. The world he knew no longer existed. Everything that had happened the night before had already flooded the internet, spread across news channels, and was being discussed in pubs, offices, and even at royal receptions. If he had ever dreamed of fame, he got it. But not in the way he had imagined. The headlines were everywhere, tearing through the media. Drunk tourist attacks a royal guard, and instantly regrets it. The royal guard does not forgive disrespect. The video that will make you respect British traditions. The footage of his humiliation spread across the internet faster than a virus. Every second, every moment, from his smug expression to the humiliating fall after the rifle strike, was now available for millions to see. His drunken smirk, his arms spread wide as if he owned the world, his attempt to act like he was in control, and then the hit, the fall, the shame. This wasn't just a video, it was a public execution. He tried turning off his phone, disconnecting from the internet, but it was too late. Every social media platform had turned into a battlefield where he was losing by a landslide. That's karma. He thought he could do anything. Now he can enjoy his time in jail. The guard is a champion. British traditions remain unshaken. His name became a meme. Screenshots of his humiliated expressions were shared worldwide. Even people who had never heard of him before now recognized him from the most shameful moment of his life, the exact second he realized he had made a terrible mistake. But online humiliation was just the beginning. A £20,000 fine. It wasn't just a hit to his wallet, it was a hit to his pride. He was used to making money from fights, from victories, from the blood he shed in the ring. But now his money wasn't going into his pocket. It was paying for his own disgrace. A permanent ban from the UK. He was officially blacklisted as a tourist. Forever. He could love or hate this country, but now it had closed its doors to him for good. It was like being branded persona non grata. In his world, this was the equivalent of exile. But the worst part wasn't even that. His career as a fighter was over in one night. Sponsors started dropping him. Brands he had worked with cut all ties. Gyms where he had trained announced they didn't want to be associated with his name. Even his own teammates in the ring mocked him. How could you embarrass yourself like that? The guard knocked you out better than any real fighter ever could. You're not a kickboxer anymore. You're a walking meme. He lost everything. He used to think fear was standing in the ring against a tough opponent. Now he knew the truth. Real fear was realizing that the world no longer took him seriously. And what about the royal guard? He stood at his post, just as motionless, just as fearless, a symbol of Britain that could never be broken. In the square in front of Buckingham Palace, everything returned to normal. The crowd kept taking pictures, recording videos, admiring the architecture and the grand atmosphere. It was as if nothing had happened. And yet, there was one silent reminder of the previous day's events. A tall, unmoving figure in a red uniform. The guard stood just as straight as ever. Nothing in his posture betrayed the fact that just hours ago, someone had tried to humiliate him, to challenge the entire system, to spit in the face of tradition. His gaze was fixed ahead, past the tourists, past the noise and the chaos. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't react. The Royal Guard is not just a group of men in uniforms. It is discipline perfected. It is unshakable resilience, a cold and calculated mind, an unwavering commitment to duty. They do not fall. They do not yield. They do not respond to provocations. They stand just as Britain stands, indestructible, immovable, unchanged. That day, a drunk tourist tried to show he was stronger, that he was above it all, that he could do whatever he wanted. But now, who was looking up, and who had been broken? Somewhere in London, a man who once thought he was the king of his own life was realizing that the world didn't revolve around his whims. He sat alone, staring blankly at an empty wall. The roar of the crowd echoed in his mind. The moment he fell, the realization that no one had taken his side. He had wanted to prove his strength, but in the end, he became a laughingstock. And all because of what? A few drinks and one stupid decision. Alcohol is not courage. It's not about bravery, strength, or proving yourself. It's about losing control, losing dignity, and destroying your own life. Too many people justify their mistakes with the phrase, "I was drunk." But does that make them any less foolish? Any less disgraceful? The guard stood. The guard didn't flinch. The guard remained where he was yesterday, where he was a year ago, where he was 100 years ago. And the one who tried to humiliate him? He was the one who had been broken. He didn't try to take down the guard. He took down himself. And now he would remember that for a very, very long time.